Let me share something with you that most executives don't realize till it's far too late. That they're not forced out of an organization because of their performance. They were forced out of an organization because they're no longer necessary. And I've seen this happen time and time again in a lot of organizations. You're a senior leader in the room doing your work, and all of a sudden, you are no longer necessary. And so people start to marginalize you, move you to the side, and continue to work without you. Then the reason why this happens is when people are mentally asking the question, is this still the right person to set the vision and the strategy when times get tough? That's the question that they ask about you. But when they ask that question in their mind, it might be another 9 months before you're forced out of the role. See, I've seen this play out in many different organizations. So when you get to be a senior executive, you're at the senior executive level, there's nobody that's going to come around with security, have you put your stuff in a box and watch you walk out the door, and then they direct deposit or mail you your last paycheck. See, at the executive level, it doesn't happen like that. Here's how it happens at the executive level. You continue to come to the senior leadership meeting, and people start to have conversations around you. They have the meeting before the meeting, they have the meeting after the meeting, or when you're in the meeting, the things that you say don't have any weight, matter, or significance whatsoever. See, what's happened is that 9 months before you were forced out, you lost trust. You lost the confidence of your colleagues and your superior. You are no longer trusted with the strategy or the vision of the organization. See, you got into a room that you wanted to be in, that you deserve to be in, that your credentials say that you should be there. But when you got in the room, you became someone else. Now, when I say became someone else, you have stopped becoming the strategic thinker that the organization needs. That you have gone from being a person who is relied on for their insight, their expertise, and their thought process to someone who's just seen as a person that we got to keep on the team, that we can't let him go because the repercussions will be too significant if we had to let you go. Now, when I mean repercussions are too significant, let me give you a couple of examples. We've seen a lot of publicly traded corporations whose stock price goes up and down depending upon the news of the day. And there's nothing more disruptive to a stock price than when a senior executive who is theoretically responsible for some aspect of the work is announced that they are leaving the organization. That can be a disruption. Now, it's really disruptive if it's the CEO, but it doesn't have to be the CEO. It could be the chief technology officer, the chief innovation officer. It could be a person that they brought on the team to manage a new rollout of a new product or a service. It could be anybody senior. And so if that person left the organization immediately, it would disrupt the stock price. So companies don't do that. Not with executives, they don't. See, if you were in marketing or lower level in operations, they don't care about walking you out the door because your leadership role doesn't send the same gravitas as somebody in the C-suite's leadership role. And so the public will be more interested in that senior executive than someone that's at a lower level. So for that reason, Your colleagues are never going to walk you out of the door when you become unnecessary. Instead, they're going to work around you. They're going to have meetings that won't include you, but then you'll be at the main meeting, but you will be irrelevant because the decision has already been made. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Because I don't want this to happen to you. And I've seen it happen to a lot of executives, and it sends a bad signal about the culture of your organization. So I'm going to give you this like real life example. I worked on a senior leadership team that was doing some very complicated, complex work that was going to be really important, really important. And we had a senior team who I thought was a generally high-performing team. We all executed. We all did what we were asked. We all baked in the strategy. But there was one leader in one meeting who acted out of sorts. That they said something that everybody looked around and started to question, is this the person that we need leading this strategy? I honestly thought the same thing myself when they said what they said. And I wish I could give you more context, but I can't. I have to protect the innocent at this point in time. So they said something that I was like, I can't believe they said that in a meeting. It's irrelevant to the conversation. And that's the moment several leaders behind this person's back started to ask the question, is he even necessary? Do we need him to win? Because clearly he's not carrying his weight. See, what happened in this circumstance, this leader was, number one, no longer strategic. They were no longer thinking strategically about the big picture of the organization. So here's what happened next. We didn't get rid of this leader at all because nobody had the courage or the cojones to just tell this leader that they needed to move out. Besides, stakes were so high that if this person left, it would absolutely have hit the newspaper and affected everything that we were doing. So here's what happened instead. The senior leadership of the organization decided to hire someone else to come in to support this leader. Well, we need to give you some more support to get the job done. Wouldn't you like to have someone to help you with the challenge? And this leader, of course, was like, yeah, I always want more help. Thinking that this person was going to be a subordinate. No, this person was brought in as a strategic advisor. And their job was to layer this executive. Now, when I say layer, that's a term that I learned back when I was in politics, which is sometimes campaigns, when they're going in the wrong direction and they're losing, they won't fire the campaign manager because it will send a message that the campaign is dysfunctional and they'll lose support. So instead of what they would do is that they would just bring another campaign manager in on top and give them a different title, but strip all of the responsibilities from the original campaign manager and give it to the second person. And they called it layered. This person was layered, that you might have been on top, but somebody was layered on top of you. That's exactly what happens in politics. In this circumstance, this organization I was a part of, that's exactly what happened too. That somebody was brought in to support them, to balance them, to help them, to serve them. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. So if they bring in somebody to support you that was not a part of a hiring structure, that was not a part of a planned development or employee acquisition, but a special person was hired to come in and support you, then you should know that chances are you're no longer necessary in your organization. You're not seen as indispensable or a critical part of the team. They brought somebody else in to be more critical than you to the team. That's a true story that I'm laying out for you. Now, I want to give you the third thing that's probably happened, that the reason why an executive might get moved out later, and I'm going to tell you what do I mean moved out later, and they don't happen immediately, because this is like a 9-month, maybe even a 12-month process that you will leave an organization 9 to 12 months after you stop being relevant to the work and relevant to what needed to be done. Here's the third thing. When you're in a meeting and decisions start happening around you and you get informed of them later, you've probably been layered. You've probably been layered. That if you're not at the decision-making table or in the decision-making conversation, you have been layered. Now, let me give you the final one. This is the fourth thing that I want you to understand. That if you become that leader at the senior leadership table that sounds like a parrot. And what do I mean, parrot? Is that you are agreeing with everything that gets said, particularly by the CEO. And I've seen way too many of this kind of behavior. That I was facilitating a retreat one day, and I asked them all to participate in an activity as equals. So the CEO, the COO, the chief of staff, the marketing officer, the whole team were deemed as peers as a part of this conversation. And so I asked all of them to go and write something on the flip chart, post it on the wall, and that we were going to make a decision about which ideas that they came up with is the one that was most implementable, and the one that was going to be the best. And why did this one particular leader, rather than creating that idea the way that I said, they said, well, I like the CEO's version because that looks the best. They became what I call a yes man or a yes woman. That instead of being a strategic and critical thinker, bringing their own ideas to the table, they just started to co-sign on other ideas. They became Mr. Agreeable. They just wanted to agree with everybody. Oh, I agree. You know what that says when you become just the agreeable person? That says you probably don't deserve to be at the table. Because at the executive level, you're brought there to not only think strategically and think outside of the box, but to sometimes bring the counter argument, of bring your individual perspective to the table in the conversation. But some leaders don't know how to do that. Instead of what they do, they just say, I agree. Or I agree with that. You know, I co-sign on that. I'm not saying to be disagreeable all the time and that it's not the right thing to co-sign. But in this situation, in this retreat that I'm talking about, it was clear to everybody in the room that this person was trying to kiss up to the CEO. And the CEO was a fairly new CEO. And I asked him, did he peep the game? He says, yeah, I've been dealing with this since I got here. This person just wants to get in my good graces, not understanding that I want people on my team to challenge my way of thinking, to challenge my ideas, not to agree with my ideas, because if you just agreeing with my ideas, I don't need you in the room. And this person didn't even know it and see it. So that's how you are going to get forced out. 9 months ago, you are no longer strategic in the conversation. They brought in somebody to support you. Decisions started to happen around you and not with you. And you find yourself agreeing with everything that somebody else says. You're getting ready to be pushed out of your organization. And this has nothing to do with whether you hit your KPIs and you hit your quarterly or annual goals, but it has everything to do with how you showed up as a leader. Now, I don't want this to happen to you. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you need to do. 3 things that you should be doing on a regular basis to make sure that you are not the executive who's pushed out of the organization, not because of your performance, but because of your irrelevance. First thing you need to do is you got to stop being agreeable and learn to be accountable. When I say learn to be accountable, is you need to be accountable to your peers in your team to say the things that need to be said that nobody else is willing to say. Your job should be to hold the team accountable, to remind people about the mission, remind people about the purpose of the work, calibrate what's important to the customer or what's important to your stakeholders when you're in the room. I always ask the question, so how does this help our stakeholders? How does this help our customers? How does this help our patients? How does this help our students? I don't know what your constituency is, but your first question with every idea should be, how is this going to help them? Ask the legitimate question, even if you already know the answer. Because what you want is to stimulate dialogue where people will say what they really mean by what they're doing. You have to get to a place of knowing how to ask good questions. And you got to stop agreeing with what's already been said and repeating what other people have said, but bring your original thoughts and your ideas. That is the first step for you to making sure that you don't ever move to irrelevance. I don't want you pushed out because of performance. And again, I'm going to tell you at the end how people are being pushed out and they don't know it. Here's the second one. You got to start to make sure every single time that your brain is visible to the room. Now, when I say your brain is visible to the room, I'm not saying crack your skull open and nothing crazy like that. I'm saying that people need to know how you think. They need to understand how you think about problems, how you think about challenges. That means whatever your thought process is, you have to bring it to the table. You have to bring your perspective. Let me give you an example. When I was in the C-suite at a large academic health system, I'll never forget, we were talking about something in the room and everybody had a degree in either business, medicine, or healthcare administration. I don't have a degree in business, medicine, or healthcare administration. I have a history degree as a bachelor's in undergrad, and I have a master's degree in social work. I don't have any of those other degrees. So when we're in this executive team meeting, I think like a social worker. I don't think like a doctor. I don't think like a lawyer. I don't think like a CPA or a hospitalist, hospital manager, hospital administrator. I don't think like any of them, but I'm in the C-suite with them. So we start to have the conversation, and then I'm thinking about the problem from my perspective, and I let them see my brain, and I put something on the table that seemed to come out of left field because nobody in the room thought like I thought. And the CEO said this after I made the statement, and we had a great discussion that shifted the direction of what people were thinking. He said, in front of my peers, this is why I like having Anton in the room, because he thinks about things in ways that none of us do. He sees things from a perspective that none of us sees. And it helped us to make a better decision. So my question for you, is your brain visible to your colleagues? Do they see how you think? Do they understand how your mind works? If they don't, you got to change that. If you want to be a leader in an organization of consequence and impact and influence, and not one that gets forced out 9 months later, you got to learn how to show them your brain. Let them see your brain. Let them see how you think, how you dissect challenges and problems and develop solutions. What is the independent thinking that you bring to the table? This also goes the same if you serve on a board. Nobody wants a person in a boardroom because they are attaboy and agreeable to everything that's said. You're in the room to ask the strategic questions. And people should expect strategic questions from you because they see how you think. That's what I mean when I say, is your brain visible? Now, here's the third thing I want to give you. This is the final thing, and then I'm going to tell you how you know an executive has been forced out. The third thing that you need to do, the third thing that you need to understand is you got to stop tying yourself to past performance of the organization and tie yourself to future outcomes. You can't be tied to past performance. You got to be tied to future outcomes. Your past accolades, your past achievements are irrelevant. Nobody cares what you did a week ago or a year ago or 5 years ago. They want to know what you're going to do tomorrow. So you have to be a leader whose work is connected to the future of the organization. This is my hint for you to understand the term innovation, little I and big I innovation. Big I innovation is the person who has the title to lead innovation in the organization. But little I innovation are new ideas that can be unpacked, explored, and could lead to future opportunities and future outcomes. You got to always stay tied to the future of your organization. You can't just be tied to the past. Nobody cares what you did last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. It's irrelevant. As Janet Jackson would say, what have you done for me lately? And as Anton Gunn is going to say, what are you going to do for your organization tomorrow? Not your team, but your organization. So that's it. Those are the three things. If you want to make sure you maintain relevance, the first thing you got to do is to stop being agreeable and start being accountable, holding the team accountable for outcomes, asking good strategic questions about how is this going to help our customers, our patients, our employees, our stakeholders, our suppliers, whatever the stakeholder is. You need to ask the question, how is this really going to serve them? Can you walk me through how this is really going to serve them? That's the first thing, is stop being agreeable and be accountable. The second thing is make sure your brain is visible. Your brain needs to be visible. They need to see how you think, process information, and what new ideas you're bringing to the table. And the third thing you need to do is to always bring those ideas to the table. You got to be tied to future outcomes, not past achievements. Past achievements, past performance don't help you. You got to be tied to future outcomes. Set the table. If you do that, you will avoid the kind of examples that we see over and over again. Here's an example of how you know someone has been pushed out of the organization, even though they're a high performer. 9 months goes by, you see less and less of them, and then all of a sudden you hear, we're assigning you to a special project. If you go from being an instrumental executive in the organization and all of a sudden you're being moved out of your role to be put on a special project, and they give you more money and more compensation so you don't feel like it's a demotion, but you've lost your staff, you lost your P&L, you don't have many meetings to go to, you have autonomy over this project, and that project doesn't seem to be tied in the core business, then you have been pushed out. And it ain't because of your performance. It's because of your irrelevance. Another example that we see time and time again is when the leader of the organization decides to reorganize the leadership team. That he goes from 5 direct reports as a CEO to 2 direct reports. And he puts the other 3 people reporting up to those 2. And if you one of those 3 people, then know you have been pushed out of a power position in your organization. And here's the final one. This is the third one. Is that they go through a riff or a reorganization or some other kind of aspect of massive change, and they come to you and say, hey, you've been here 29 years, you've done all of the things. We want to offer you a package that we will pay you your full salary, not for the 2 years or 1 year you have left for your retirement, but they're going to give you 2 years of salary. Then they're going to let you go out on a higher salary, which is they're going to give you a bonus. So your last 2 years is a higher salary. They're giving you a bonus, and then you're going to retire. That happens. The better way to make sure you don't have massive disruption in the stock market is to say an executive is retiring, but there's a succession plan in place. And that's the last point that I'm going to bring. If there was a succession plan developed for your role and you really weren't involved in the succession plan, then that means you've been forced out. People stop thinking about you as being an instrumental cog in the organization 9 months before these things happen. That's what happens to executives who get pushed out and forced out of an organization, is because they were no longer strategic. Decisions started happening around them, and they were just Mr. or Mrs. Go Along to get along. I don't want that for you. So my question for you, and I want you to put it in the chat. Are you clear that you are dispensable to your organization? Or when I say dispensable, are you clear that you are an executive that is needed around the table? If you clear, I want you to put the word clear in the comments. But if you don't know for sure, then I want you to put the word unsure in the comments. And some of you might be too afraid to put it in the comments because you don't want anybody to know that you don't know whether you're secure in your leadership role in the organization. I can respect that. I can understand that. So if you're unsure, I want you to send me a direct message and type the word unsure. And I'm going to give you 3 strategic questions that you can ask and find out whether you're sure or not, to get some clarity about whether you're essential to the work of the organization. And then I'd be happy to have a conversation with you once you get those answers. So there you have it. I want to thank you for watching this episode of LinkedIn Live. I'm trying to give you game about what's happening at a leadership level in your organization and what challenges you might be dealing with, not only with yourself, but with your executive culture. Because if you're not being forced out, chances are somebody on your team is. And these are the signs that you can know that it's happening. I want to thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day.